We have spoken previously of the manner of decision-making which caused those harvestable entities to remain here upon the closing of the second major cycle of our current master cycle. They are unlikely to leave until their other selves are harvestable also. This causes them to be wanderers of a type, wanderers who have never left the earth plane because of their free will rather than because of their vibrational level. These entities are not a social memory complex, but rather a group of mind-body-spirit complexes dedicated to service. These entities work together, but are not completely unified. Thus, they do not completely see each the other's thoughts, feelings, and motives. However, their desire to serve is the fourth-dimensional type of desire, thus melding them into what we may call a brotherhood. When a social memory complex has achieved its complete understanding of its desire, it may conclude that its desire is service to others with the distortion towards reaching their hand, figuratively, to any entities who call for aid. These wanderers, whom we may call the brothers and sisters of sorrow, move towards this calling of sorrow. These entities are from all reaches of the infinite creation and are bound together by the desire to serve in this distortion. The desire to serve must be distorted towards a great deal of purity of mind and what we may call foolhardiness or bravery, depending upon our distortion complex judgment. The challenge danger of the wanderer is that it will forget its mission, become karmically involved, and thus be swept into the maelstrom from which it had incarnated to aid the destruction. An entity, which acts in a consciously unloving manner, in action with other beings can become karmically involved. If the wanderer entity demonstrated, through action, a negative orientation towards other selves, it would be caught into the planetary vibration and, when harvested, possibly repeat again the master cycle of third density as a planetary entity. Depending upon the plan, which has been approved by the Council of Nine, some wanderers offer themselves for but one incarnation, while others offer themselves for varying lengths of time, up to and including the last 2 cycles of 25,000 years. If the agreed-upon mission is complete, the wanderer's mind-body-spirit complex will go to the home vibration. There have been a few wanderers in the past 50,000 years. There have been many more which chose to join this last cycle of 25,000 years, and many, many more which have come for harvest. There are several reasons for the incarnation of wanderers during harvest. They may be divided by the terms self and other self. The overriding reason for the offering of these brothers and sisters of sorrow in incarnative states is the possibility of aiding other selves by the lightening of the planetary consciousness distortions and the probability of offering catalyst to other selves, which will increase the harvest. There are 2 other reasons for choosing this service, which have to do with the self. The wanderer, if it remembers and dedicates itself to service, will polarize much more rapidly than is possible in the higher and more harmonious densities due to the amount of catalyst in the third density. Thusly, the positively oriented wanderer chooses to hazard the danger of the forgetting in order to be of service to others by radiating love of others. Similarly, the negatively oriented wanderer dares to hazard the forgetting in order that it might accelerate its progress in evolution in its own density by serving itself in third density, by offering to other selves the opportunity to hear the information having to do with negative polarization. Once the negatively polarized entity has reached a certain point in the wisdom density, it becomes extremely unlikely that it will choose to risk the forgetting, for this polarization is not selfless, but selfish, and with wisdom realizes the jeopardy of such wandering. Thus, there are very, very few fifth-density negative wanderers, for they fear the forgetting. Occasionally, a sixth-density negative entity becomes a wanderer in an effort to continue to polarize towards the negative. This is extremely unusual. The final reason is, within the mind-body-spirit totality, or the social memory complex totality, which may judge that an entity or members of a societal entity can make use of third density catalyst to recapitulate a learning teaching, which is adjudged to be less than perfectly balanced. This especially applies to those entering into and proceeding through sixth density, wherein the balance between compassion and wisdom is perfected. Approximately 250 years in the past, as we measure time, there began to be a significant amount of entities who by seniority were incarnating for learned teaching purposes, rather than for the lesser of the learned teachings of those less aware of the process. This was the Confederation's signal to enable communication to take place. The wanderers, which came among us, began to make themselves felt at approximately this time, firstly offering ideas or thoughts containing the distortion of free will. This was the prerequisite for further wanderers, which had information of a more specific nature to offer. The thought must precede the action. In 1981, the number of incarnate wanderers approached 65 million. At this time, there are approximately 400 million of these entities. These numbers are approximate due to an heavy influx of those birthed, due to an intensive need to lighten the planetary vibration and thus aid in harvest. Fourth density wanderers, of which there are not many, will tend to choose those entities which seem to be full of love or in need of love. There is the great probability of entities making errors in judgment due to the compassion with which other selves are viewed. The fifth density wanderer is one who is not tremendously affected by the stimulus of the various rays of other self, and in its own way offers itself when a need is seen. Such entities are not likely to engage in the, shall we say, custom of our peoples called marriage, and are very likely to feel an aversion to childbearing and child-raising, due to the awareness of the impropriety of the planetary vibrations relative to the harmonious vibrations of the density of light. The largest number of wanderers, as we call them, are of the sixth density. A significant portion of sixth density wanderers are those of Ra's social memory complex. Another large portion consists of those who aided those in South America. Another portion, those aiding Atlantis. All sixth density and all brother and sister groups, due to the unified feeling that, as they had been aided by shapes such as the pyramid, so they could aid our peoples. The sixth density, whose means of propagation we may liken to what we call fusion, is likely to refrain, to a great extent, from the bisexual reproductive programming of the bodily complex, and instead seek out those with whom the sexual energy transfer is of the complete fusion nature, insofar as this is possible in manifestation, in third density. This sexual fusion may be seen, with or without what we may call sexual intercourse, to be the complete melding of the mind, the body, and the spirit, in what feels to be a constant orgasm, shall we say, of joy and delight each in the other's beingness. Due to the extreme variance between the vibratory distortions of third density and those of the more dense densities, if you will, wanderers have, as a general rule, some form of handicap, difficulty, or feeling of alienation, which is severe. The most common of these difficulties are alienation, the reaction against the planetary vibration, by personality disorders, as we would call them, and body complex ailments, indicating difficulty in adjustment to the planetary vibrations, such as allergies, as we would call them. The forgetting process can be penetrated to the extent of the wanderer remembering what it is and why it is upon the planetary sphere. However, it would be an infringement if wanderers penetrated the forgetting so far as to activate the more dense bodies and thus be able to live, shall we say, in a godlike manner. This would not be proper for those who have chosen to serve. The free will of third density entities needs be preserved. Thus wanderers volunteer for third density genetic or DNA connections to the mind-body-spirit complex. Between 8.5% and 9.75% of wanderers are penetrating their status intelligently. There is a larger percentile group of those who have a fairly well-defined, shall we say, symptomology indicating to them that they are not of this, shall we say, insanity. This amounts to a bit over 50% of the remainder. Nearly one-third of the remainder are aware that something about them is different, so we see there are many gradations of awakening to the knowledge of being a wanderer. We may add that it is to the middle and first of these groups that this information will, shall we say, make sense. The methods used to awaken wanderers are varied. The center of each approach is the entrance into the conscious and subconscious in such a way as to avoid causing fear and to maximize the potential for an understandable subjective experience, which has meaning for the entity. Many such occur in sleep, others in the midst of many activities during the waking hours. The approach is flexible and does not necessarily include the close encounter syndrome, as we are aware. The infringement upon free will is greatly undesired. Therefore, those entities which are wanderers upon our plane of illusion will be the only subjects for the thought projections, which make up the so-called close encounters and meetings between positively oriented social memory complexes and wanderers. The subconscious expectations of entities cause the nature and detail of thought form experience offered by Confederation thought form entities. Thus, if a wanderer expects a physical examination, it will perforce be experienced with as little distortion towards alarm or discomfort as is allowable by the nature of the expectations of the subconscious distortions of the wanderer. The thought form experiences are subjective and, for the most part, do not occur in this density. As we have said before, wanderers become completely the creature of third density in mind-body complex. There is just as much chance of the Orion group's influence to a wanderer entity as to a mind-body-spirit complex of this planetary sphere. The only difference occurs in the spirit complex, which, if it wishes, has an armor of light, if you will, which enables it to recognize more clearly that which is not, as it would appropriately be desired by the mind-body-spirit complex. This is not more than a bias, and cannot be called an understanding. Furthermore, the wanderer is, in its own mind-body-spirit complex, less distorted towards the, shall we say, deviousness of third-density positive-negative confusions. Thus, it often does not recognize as easily, as a more negative individual, the negative nature of thoughts or beings. It was the aim of wanderers to serve the entities of this planet in whatever way was requested, and it was also the aim of wanderers that their vibratory patterns might lighten the planetary vibration as a whole, thus ameliorating the effects of planetary disharmony and palliating any results of this disharmony. Specific intentions, such as aiding in a situation not yet manifest, are not the aim of wanderers. Light and love go where they are sought and needed, and their direction is not planned aforetimes. At this time, you may note that, as with any entities, each wanderer has its unique abilities, biases, and specialties, so that from each portion of each density represented among the wanderers comes an array of pre-incarnative talents, which then may be expressed upon this plane, which we now experience, so that each wanderer, in offering itself before incarnation, has some special service to offer in addition to the doubling effect of planetary love and light and the basic function of serving as beacon or shepherd. Thus, there are those of fifth density whose abilities to express wisdom are great. There are fourth and sixth density wanderers whose ability to serve as, shall we say, passive radiators or broadcasters of love and love light are immense. There are many others whose talents brought into this density are quite varied. Thus, wanderers have three basic functions. Once the forgetting is penetrated, the first two being basic, the tertiary one being unique to that particular mind-body-spirit complex. We may note at this point, while you ponder the possibility-probability vortices, that although you have many items which cause distress and thus offer seeking and service opportunities, there is always one container, in that store of peace, love, light, and joy. This vortex may be very small, but to turn one's back upon it is to forget the infinite possibilities of the present moment. Could our planet polarize towards harmony in one fine, strong moment of inspiration? Yes, my friends. It is not probable, but it is ever possible.